The second I told my husband I'd lost my job, he didn't even blink. No worry, no surprise, just raw, seething anger. Figures you'd get canned, he growled, slamming his coffee mug on the table. You've always thought you're smarter than everyone else. Maybe now you'll get a clue. I stood there, still in my coat, clutching my bag like it was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. I'd played the scene in my head 100 times, picturing him wrapping me in a hug, saying we'd sort it out together. But this wasn't that scene. This wasn't that guy. Truth is, I hadn't lost my job. I'd been bumped up. Out of nowhere, after years of grinding in the shadows, I'd gotten a promotion. But as I drove home that night, thinking about how Derek had been pulling away, always distracted, I felt this knot in my gut. What if he didn't handle it well? What if he hated me for out-earning him? He grew up in a family where the guy was supposed to be the rock, the one who held it all together, as his dad always preached. I'd heard it so many times, that old-school line repeated at every family dinner. Still, I didn't expect him to lose it like that. He glared at me like I was a problem he'd just noticed, a weight he didn't know he'd been dragging. "Do you even get what this means for us?" he shouted, pacing the living room. "How are we supposed to cover the mortgage now?" He didn't once ask how I was or what went down. I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't want to fight back, but because my throat locked up, like my body knew to shut down. And maybe that was for the best, because if I'd spilled the truth right then, that I'd been promoted, that I'd be making more than ever, I'd have missed what came next. I'd have missed the fractures starting to show. Instead, I stood there while he ranted, telling me I'd never pulled my weight, that all I did was push papers while he built real things. I don't even remember the rest of that night clearly. I think I locked myself in the bathroom, stood under the shower for a good 45 minutes, letting the hot water burn my skin, like it could rinse off the shame, the confusion, the dread. That night, he crashed on the couch without a word. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my brain spinning. There'd been signs, I realized, signs I'd brushed off for too long. The late nights at the office, the sneaky glances at his phone, the way he stopped looking me in the eye when we talked. And now this, his total lack of care, his iciness. It wasn't just about my lie anymore. Something else was brewing. Something uglier. And I could feel it bubbling up inside me, the need to survive, to uncover the truth before it crushed me. Looking back, the signs were their way before I said a word about losing my job. They weren't screaming warnings, not at first. Just little things. The way Derek started staying out later, always with some half-baked excuse. His phone, once left on the counter without a care, was now always face down, locked, or in his pocket. Or how he ditched our Sunday pancake mornings, something we'd done forever, with just a shrug and a maybe later. I told myself. It was just work stress. His tech startup had landed a big contract, and he was busier than ever. I wanted to believe that, I really did, because the other option, that the man I'd shared a life with for 8 years was slipping away, was too raw to face. But the moment that stuck with me, the one I kept replaying, happened 3 months before I tested him. I'd gotten off work early one Thursday. My team had crushed a deadline, and I thought I'd surprise Derek, make his favorite tacos, crack open a beer, maybe bring back a spark of what we'd been missing. I slipped into the house quietly, expecting to find him hunched over his laptop in the den. But as soon as I stepped inside, I heard his voice from the bedroom. He was on the phone, speaking in a way I didn't recognize, low, careful, almost scripted. "No, she hasn't caught on yet," he said, pausing. "We just need a bit longer." Then he chuckled, not the warm laugh I loved, but something sharp, cold, almost mean. I froze in the hallway, gripping the doorframe, my heart hammering. He was talking about me. I was sure of it. I didn't hear the other voice, maybe it was on speaker, maybe not. But the weight of his words hit me like a brick. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then he walked out, saw me, and flashed a smile, kissing my forehead like it was nothing. I smiled back, started chopping onions for dinner, but something inside me broke that night. A quiet split, hidden from view, but spreading fast. From then on, I watched him differently, listened closer, caught the subtle changes in his vibe. The way he dodged talk about our future, the way he got annoyed when I asked about his day, the small lies he didn't even know I'd noticed. I wasn't losing it. I wasn't paranoid. My instincts were screaming, and I was finally tuning in. It was a weird kind of pain, grieving something that was still breathing, still pretending to be alive. I kept telling myself to wait, to gather more clues, until that moment in the hallway after my fake firing, when the last of my denial shattered. That's when I knew something massive was going down. Something I hadn't even begun to grasp. But I was about to find out. And once I did, there'd be no turning back. It was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon when I heard the front door creak open. I'd called in sick that day, saying I wasn't feeling great. Really, I just needed time to think. Derek still thought I was jobless, broken, scared to face the world. He had no clue I was still working, no clue I'd been promoted, no clue I was piecing myself together, quiet and careful. I froze when I heard not one, but two voices in the house. The second wasn't a coworker or a buddy. It was Margaret, my mother-in-law. I crept into the hallway, standing just behind the guest room door. I knew I shouldn't eavesdrop, but something about their casual midday chat made my skin crawl. Margaret's voice cut through, sharp as ever. Why the random visit? Everything okay? It's going exactly as we planned, Derek said, sounding almost smug. She told me she got fired yesterday. Completely wrecked, just like you said. I clamped my hand over my mouth, forcing myself not to gasp. Good, Margaret said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. She's got no choice now. She'll have to agree to our terms. My knees wobbled. I leaned against the wall, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear what came next. She's totally dependent on me now, Derek went on. Selling the house is just a matter of time. Margaret let out a smug little laugh. Told you that girl was never right for you. Too driven, too full of herself. You think she'd stick around if it wasn't for your dad's house? It hit me like a slap. That house was our home for 9 years. I'd poured my heart into it, my time, my cash, my everything. And now they were planning to sell it, like I was just some guest they'd finally outsmarted. Don't start, Mom, Derek said, sighing. We've been over this. And what about Sarah? Margaret asked. When are you telling her? It's time? Sarah. The name hit me like a bucket of cold water. Sarah Mitchell. I vaguely knew her, Tom's girlfriend before he passed. Tom, Derek's older brother, died in a motorcycle crash 4 years ago. Sarah vanished after the memorial. I had no idea Derek was still in touch, let alone. She's ready, Derek said, his voice softening. The baby's doing great. Sarah says she's growing fast. Looks just like Tom. My stomach churned. I'll adopt her once the divorce is done, Derek said, like he was closing a deal. She'll be my daughter. Our daughter. I couldn't breathe. Margaret cooed, just think how happy Sarah will be when she hears the house is up for sale. She's waited so long. My ears rang. My vision blurred. This wasn't just cheating. This was a full-on replacement. They weren't just planning to ditch me, they were planning to wipe me out. And the worst part? I had no idea how long this had been cooking. No clue how many smiles, how many hugs had been fake, calculated. My husband wasn't just straying. He was scheming. I always knew Sarah was the one, Margaret said, her voice syrupy, the tone she saved for people she actually liked. You two are perfect. Such a shame you met her after you married that one. That one? Not Lisa, not your wife, just that one. A roadblock, a nuisance. I bit my knuckle to stay quiet. My whole body shook, but I couldn't stop listening. I needed every word. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Derek muttered. We still need to make sure Lisa doesn't fight the divorce. She won't, Margaret said, confident. Not if you play it right. Remind her she's got nothing, no job, no savings. She'll cave. I clenched my fists, every nerve screaming. They thought I was done, trapped. But I wasn't. Not yet. And if she doesn't? Margaret asked. What if she gets a lawyer? Derek's voice dropped, too calm. Then we hit her with the cheating angle. I nearly stumbled. Cheating? Margaret asked. Doesn't matter, Derek said. I've got some old texts from that work trip she took last year. Just her and some coworkers, but I can spin it. Enough to make her look bad. You're a smart one, Margaret said, proud. But he wasn't done. If that fails, Derek added, we say she was stealing company data. She handled sensitive stuff. Brought files home all the time. I'll say I caught her trying to sell it. I sank to the floor, hands freezing. My husband, the man who once stayed up all night with me during a stomach bug, who painted our living room while I picked the shade, was planning to ruin me. He was ready to lie in court, to accuse me of things I'd never done, just to shove me out for Sarah and a kid that wasn't his. Sarah, the shy, soft-spoken woman I barely remembered from Tom's memorial. She'd seemed gentle, broken. I never thought she'd come back like this, not as the woman taking my place, not as the mother of the child my husband wanted to claim. How's the baby? Derek asked, his voice suddenly light, almost happy. Strong, Margaret replied, beaming. Sarah says she's growing fast. Looks just like Tom. Same smile, same eyes. You'll see soon. The room spun. They were building a new family, Derek, Sarah, the kid, and Margaret, always Margaret. In their minds, I was already gone. Just a signature away. I'll tell her tonight, Derek said. She's already shaken from losing her job. It's the perfect time. I'll play the nice guy, say it's better for both of us. Offer her some cash to walk away. Margaret snorted. Play up the pity. Make her feel like dead weight. She'll fold. Women like her always do. I bit my lip so hard it bled. But even through the sting, I smiled, just a little, because they didn't know. I hadn't been fired. I'd been promoted. Their plan was already unraveling, and they had no idea. I stayed crouched behind that door long after their voices faded. I didn't budge when I heard the couch groan or the front door click shut behind Margaret. I just sat there, hugging my knees, heart pounding so hard I thought it'd betray me. My body was stuck, but my mind was on fire. This wasn't just a stab in the back. This was a full-on ambush. And I'd walked right into it, blind, clueless, until now. But I wasn't going to be the one left bleeding. Not quietly. Not ever. That night, I didn't say a word to Derek. He acted like it was just another evening, poured himself a beer, flipped on the TV, shot me that fake neutral look that now felt so vile. I avoided his eyes. I didn't trust myself to look at him. Because if I did, I might ruin the act, and I needed that act, at least for a bit longer. In bed, I lay still, eyes wide open, my back to him. He passed out fast, like always, as if plotting to erase me didn't weigh on him at all. I listened to his steady breathing and started planning. The next morning, I was out the door before the sun came up. I didn't head to work, not yet. I went to the garage, where we kept old files, bills, receipts, all the paper trails of our life together. I needed proof, something solid to show I'd poured myself into that house, not just my time, but my money. The new furnace? My bonus covered it. The hardwood floors we put in last year? My savings. I dug through boxes, pulling out bank statements, contractor invoices, even the receipt for the custom blinds I'd picked out. I stuffed them into a duffel bag and drove across town to the one person I could count on, Jess. Jess Harper wasn't just a coworker, she was my rock. For years, we'd been each other's lifeline through late-night projects and office drama. She knew my takeout order, my worst fears, the time I tried to bake a cake for Derek's birthday and nearly set the kitchen on fire. Most importantly, she'd never sold me out, not even with petty office gossip. That made her gold right now. When I showed up at her place, she didn't pry. She just looked at me, stepped aside, and let me in. I need a favor, I whispered, my voice shaky. Name it, she said, no hesitation. In her dining room, I spread the documents across her table. If anything happens, if I go quiet, if I stop answering my phone, get these to my lawyer. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. You're freaking me out a little, but okay. Whatever you need. I let out a breath, the knot in my chest loosening just a fraction. I hadn't told her everything, not about Sarah, not about the kid, not yet. But she got it. She knew something was seriously wrong, and that was enough for now. Driving back home, I passed the lake where Derek and I used to walk on weekends. I remembered how he'd grab my hand, how he used to look at me like I was his everything. That guy was gone. The one waiting at home now? A stranger wearing his face. And tonight, that stranger was going to sit me down, look me in the eye, and try to push me out of my own life. He had no clue I was already building my counterattack. When I walked through the door that evening, I could feel it coming. The big talk, the performance he'd rehearsed. It was written all over him, the fake concern, the way he carried himself like he was about to do me a favor. Derek Walsh was ready to play the good guy in his own betrayal. Hey, he said, his voice soft, measured. Can we talk? I gave him a tired nod, just enough to keep him thinking I was beaten down. Sure, I said, dropping my bag by the door. He motioned to the living room, already staged like a scene from a bad movie. The lights were low, 2 beers on the coffee table, a throw blanket slung over the couch like this was going to be some cozy heart-to-heart. I sat down. He took the chair across from me, leaning forward, hands clasped, letting out a sigh so fake. I almost rolled my eyes. Lisa, he started, I've been thinking a lot about us, about where we're at, and I think we've drifted apart. I kept my eyes on the beer bottle, nodding slightly, playing along. I don't want this to get messy, he went on, leaning closer. No lawyers, no drama. I just think it's time we admit this marriage isn't working anymore. He sounded so sad, like he was the one hurting, like this was tearing him up. With you out of work now, he added, all gentle, maybe this is a chance for a fresh start. For both of us. My stomach twisted. I let my lip quiver, just a touch. You're talking divorce? He nodded, grabbing his beer like he'd earned it. Yeah, but friendly, clean. I don't want to fight. I'm willing to help you get back on your feet. You'll need a place, some cash to settle in. I tilted my head, looking fragile. You'd do that for me? Of course, he said, hand on his heart like some saint. I care about you, Lisa. I just don't think we're right for each other anymore. We've both changed. He paused, then dropped the bomb. The house, it's legally mine. Dad left it to me. But I want to be fair. I'll give you a settlement, enough to cover rent for a bit. I blinked, letting out a shaky breath. How much? He tossed out a number. It was a joke, barely enough to cover a few months in a cheap apartment. But I didn't flinch. I just stared at him, like I was seeing him clearly for the first time. I thought we'd fight harder, I whispered. I thought we were tougher than this. Derek reached out, touched my hand like he was still in the role. I'm sorry, but this is the best way forward. I promise. And right then, I gave him what he wanted. I nodded, eyes misty, lips tight, like I was defeated. Okay, I said. I'll think about it. He let out a relieved breath, thinking he'd won. But behind my quiet, behind the shaky breath and teary eyes, I was already building my case. He didn't want lawyers? Too bad. I was about to hire the best one in town. The next morning, I was out the door before Derek even woke up. He was still sprawled on the couch, tangled in a blanket, like he could hide from what he'd done. I didn't leave a note, no goodbye, just silence. Let him sweat. Downtown Riverton was still sleepy when I stepped into the old stone building where Karen Tate's office sat, squeezed between a bakery and a dry cleaner. The hallway smelled like fresh bread and coffee. I waited 10 minutes in her reception area, my leg bouncing, running through what I'd say. When Karen called my name, I walked in and laid it all out. Not everything, not Sarah, not the kid, not the betrayal that made my voice shake. But enough. Enough for a lawyer to see the fight ahead, the inherited house, the years of shared bills, the receipts, the bank statements, the way he wanted a quick, quiet divorce with a pathetic payout. Karen listened, her face steady, sharp, her pen moving across a notepad like she was mapping a war. You've been married 8 years, she asked, voice crisp. 9, I corrected. 8 legally, 1 before. She nodded, scribbled. Something? Kids? None. Proof you contributed to the house? I've got receipts, invoices, bank records. Furniture, repairs, upgrades. She leaned back, hands folded. Lisa, you've got a solid case. But you need to know, if we push this, it's not going back. It'll get ugly. He'll fight dirty. I met her eyes. He already is. Her face didn't change, but something in her gaze shifted. Maybe respect. Then let's get to work. When I stepped outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner. The weight on my chest wasn't gone, but it was lighter. I wasn't stumbling in the dark anymore. I had someone in my corner, someone who saw the game and knew how to play it. I went straight to the office after that. No more hiding. I walked in, nodded to my team, sat at my desk, and pulled up our project tracker like nothing had happened. Derek thought I was jobless and weak, but I was back in full force. My phone pinged at lunch. A text from him, hope you're holding up. Let me know when you're ready to talk more. Talk more? I almost laughed. He had no clue I'd already made my move. I texted back, will do. That afternoon, I led a meeting, approved budgets, and set up client calls. I was sharp, focused, untouchable. When I left the office at dusk, something had shifted inside me for good. I wasn't the woman who'd cried in the hallway, who'd trembled while her husband planned to erase her. That woman was gone. In her place was someone tougher, smarter, ready. He wanted me to vanish. But I was about to take back everything, on my terms. Derek was waiting when I got home that night. He was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, arms crossed, trying to look calm. But the twitch in his jaw, the way he shifted his weight, gave him away. He was on edge. Hey, he said, voice too casual, like we were just chatting about dinner plans. Got a minute? I hung my jacket slowly, turning to face him. Sure. He nodded toward the living room, same setup as before, the couch, the beers, the fake concern. He hadn't changed. He hadn't changed a thing, thinking his first act had me fooled. I sat down, and he took the chair across from me, like he was directing the same scene. I've been thinking, he started, we need to wrap this up soon. The divorce, the paperwork, get it all settled so we can move on. I nodded, keeping my face soft, worn. Okay. He blinked, surprised I wasn't pushing back. So, you're on board? I'm not fighting the divorce, I said, voice quiet. But I want to know what's fair. I've talked to someone. His face froze. Someone? Like a lawyer? His eyes narrowed. Why do you need a lawyer? I'm offering you a fair deal. We can sort this ourselves. I tilted my head, playing fragile. You said the house is yours, right? It is, he said, too quick. Dad left it to me. But we've lived here 9 years, I said. I've put money in. I've got receipts. I just want what's fair. He laughed, sharp, defensive. Lisa, come on. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. You lived here. That's not owning it. I paid for the furnace, I said softly. The floors, the blinds. All from my account. I just want that recognized. Derek stood, pacing now. I don't want this to get nasty. Then don't offer me a number that won't even cover 6 months' rent, I said, my voice still calm. He spun toward me, and for a second, the mask slipped. I saw it, anger, panic. You're being ridiculous. No, I said, steady. I'm being careful. You taught me that, remember? Plan ahead. Protect what's yours. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting. You really want to do this? Lawyers? You think that's smart? I think it's necessary, I said. You want fair? This is how it works. He didn't answer right away. He just stared, like he was trying to figure out who I was. I wasn't the broken wife he thought he'd crushed. I was a problem now. So, what do you want? He muttered. Not half the house, I said. Just what I put in. And maybe a little extra for the years you lied to me. His jaw tightened. He didn't deny the lying. He didn't even blink. And in that silence, I knew he was scared. He thought I'd fold. He didn't expect me to fight. The divorce dragged on for 8 weeks. Not smooth, not quick. Derek stalled once he realized I wasn't going to roll over. His lawyer, probably some slick buddy he bragged about to Margaret, tried every dirty trick. But Karen was better, sharper, tougher, relentless. She had copies of every receipt, every bank transfer, every signature I'd ever put on that house. We didn't chase more than what was right, but we made sure Derek couldn't keep what wasn't his. In the end, I walked away with a solid settlement, plus full recognition of everything I'd put into the house, not just money, but years of my life building a home he decided to torch. The last time I saw him was in a cold conference room. In downtown Riverton. Sarah wasn't there, but I felt her shadow behind him, waiting to step in the second I was gone. Derek wouldn't look at me, not once. When it was done, I stood, slid the pen into my bag, and said, "You never really saw me." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. I saw it in his face, regret, or maybe just shock that his script didn't play out like he planned. I moved into a small apartment by the canal. Not big, not flashy, but mine. The first night, I left every light on. Not out of fear, but because I could. No one to call me dramatic. No one to make me feel small. Just quiet. Hard-earned quiet. Word got around that Sarah and Derek were hitting rough patches. Turns out, their perfect little life wasn't so perfect. Raising a kid isn't all smiles and Instagram posts. Margaret tried to meddle, of course, she always did, sticking her nose in like she could fix their mess. But Jess heard through the grapevine that money was tight, that Sarah didn't quite fit the mold Margaret had dreamed up. None of it shocked me. Their life was built on a shaky foundation of lies, and lies don't hold up long. I don't waste my days checking up on them. I don't scroll through social media or stew in anger. I've rebuilt, slow and steady, on my own terms. My job's solid. My name carries weight. Some nights, I eat alone, but I've learned alone doesn't mean lonely. Sometimes, it's freedom. I started kickboxing on weekends. I picked up journaling again, something I hadn't done since my 20s. I call my brother more often. There are parts of me I thought were gone, buried under years of shrinking myself to fit Derek's world. But they weren't gone, just waiting. Now, I take up all the space I need. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: being underestimated is a weapon. When you rise, when you push back, they never see it coming. Derek thought I'd break. Instead, I became unbreakable. The weeks after the divorce felt like waking up in a new body. I wasn't the same Lisa who'd stood frozen in hallways, clutching doorframes, swallowing pain to keep the peace. That version of me was gone, burned away in the fire of Derek's betrayal. The settlement gave me enough to start over, but it wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming the years I'd poured into a life I thought was ours, only to find out it was a stage for his lies. My apartment by the canal became my sanctuary. Small, with creaky floors and a view of the water that shimmered at dusk. It was the first place that felt fully mine. I hung up string lights, bought a cheap rug from a flea market, and filled the shelves with books I'd always meant to read. No one's voice in my head telling me what was practical or excessive. Just me, deciding what felt right. At work, I leaned into my promotion. The new role meant longer hours, bigger projects, but I thrived in it. My team noticed the shift, how I spoke up in meetings, how I didn't hesitate to push back when a client tried to lowball us. Jess caught me in the break room one day, grinning. "You're different, you know that? Like you've been holding back all this time." I shrugged, stirring my coffee. Maybe I was. She didn't know the half of it, but she didn't need to. Jess had my back, keeping those documents safe, checking in without prying. She'd text me dumb memes or drag me out for tacos when I worked too late. It was small stuff, but it reminded me I wasn't alone, not really. Meanwhile, Derek's world was starting to crack. I didn't go looking for gossip, but Riverton's a small enough town that word travels. Through a mutual friend, I heard his startup was bleeding cash. The big contract he'd bragged about? Falling apart. Sarah wasn't settling into the life he'd promised her, either. Apparently, she'd expected a ready-made family, not the mess of a man still untangling himself from a marriage he'd tried to erase. Margaret, of course, was in the middle of it, trying to glue their shaky setup together. Jess overheard her complaining at a coffee shop, something about Sarah not being grateful enough for Derek's sacrifices. I didn't smile when I heard that, but I didn't cry either. Their chaos wasn't my problem anymore. Still, there were moments when the past crept in. One night, I found an old photo of me and Derek tucked in a book, a candid from a camping trip, both of us laughing by a fire. For a second, my chest ached. Not for him, but for the version of me who believed in that moment. I didn't rip the photo up. I just slipped it back between the pages and closed the book. I started running in the mornings, along the canal path. The air was crisp, the world quiet except for the slap of my sneakers on pavement. It was my time to think, to let the anger and hurt bleed out with every step. I wasn't running from anything anymore, I was running toward myself. One Saturday, I got a call from Karen, my lawyer. She didn't usually check in, so I knew it was something big. "Lisa, you sitting down?" she asked, her voice steady but urgent. "Yeah, what's up?" I said, pausing my coffee pour. "Derek's lawyer reached out. They're trying to renegotiate the settlement. Claiming you misrepresented your contributions to the house." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You're kidding." "Nope," she said. "They've got nothing solid, just fishing. But I need your go-ahead to shut this down." "Do it," I said without hesitation. "I've got every receipt, every bank statement. They can't touch me." "That's my girl," Karen said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I'll handle it." When I hung up, I felt a spark of something fierce. Derek wasn't done trying to claw back control, but I wasn't the same woman he'd underestimated. Karen had my back, and I had the truth. Let him try. That evening, I went to my kickboxing class, throwing punches harder than usual. The instructor, a guy named Mike, noticed and gave me a nod. "You're bringing it today," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Something fueling you?" "Just life," I said, catching my breath. He didn't push, but his grin told me he got it. After class, I sat on a bench outside the gym, scrolling through my phone. A text from my brother popped up, a photo of his new puppy, a scruffy mutt with a lopsided grin. "Meet your new nephew," he wrote. I laughed out loud, the sound echoing in the cool night air. It was the first time in months I'd laughed without a trace of bitterness. I started typing a reply, but my thoughts drifted to Sarah. Not out of anger, but curiosity. What did she see in Derek? Did she know about the lies, the plotting with Margaret? Did she think she was stepping into a fairy tale, only to find a mess? I'd never know, and honestly, I didn't need to. Her story wasn't mine to carry. Back at my apartment, I cooked a real dinner, pasta with homemade sauce, nothing fancy, but it felt good to chop vegetables, to stir something into existence just for me. As I ate, I thought about the house. Not with longing, but with clarity. It wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of everything I'd built, everything Derek tried to take. I'd fought for my share, not because of greed, but because I deserved it. Every nail, every payment, every moment I'd spent making it a home. The next day, I met Jess for coffee at a little shop by the canal. She was late, as usual, rushing in with her hair half-tied and a grin that said she'd already had too much caffeine. "Okay, spill," she said, sliding into the booth. "You look different." "Good different." I shrugged, sipping my latte. "Just figuring things out." She squinted at me, then leaned forward. "You're plotting something, aren't you?" "Not plotting," I said, smiling. "Planning." "For what?" "For me," I said simply. "For whatever comes next." She nodded, like she understood more than I'd said. We talked about work, about her latest dating disaster, about the puppy my brother was failing to train. Normal stuff, easy stuff. It felt like breathing again. That night, I sat at my desk with a notebook, jotting down ideas. Not for revenge. Not for Derek, but for me. A trip I'd always wanted to take, maybe to the coast, where I could walk along cliffs and let the wind clear my head. A new project at work I could pitch, something bold that'd make my name stick. A life that wasn't defined by what I'd lost, but by what I was building. Derek's attempt to claw back the settlement fizzled out in a week. Karen called to say his lawyer backed off once she sent over a stack of my documentation. "They didn't have a leg to stand on," she said. "You're in the clear." I thanked her, hung up, and stood in my living room, staring out at the canal. The water caught the streetlights, rippling like it was alive. I wasn't just in the clear with the settlement. I was in the clear with myself. The old Lisa would have spent nights wondering what she'd done wrong, how she could have fixed things with Derek. But now? I didn't care about his reasons. I didn't need his validation. I had my own. I started painting again, something I hadn't touched since high school. Nothing fancy, just watercolors, messy and bright, spread across my kitchen table. It wasn't about being good. It was about feeling alive, about making something that was mine. One evening, as I cleaned my brushes, my phone buzzed. Another text from Derek, "Can we talk?" No lawyers, just us. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. For a moment, I considered it, not because I wanted to hear him out, but because I was curious what he'd say. Then I set the phone down, face down, and went back to my painting. He didn't get to write the end of my story. That was mine now. Ignoring Derek's text felt like cutting the last thread tying me to him. I didn't owe him a conversation. Not after everything. My life was mine now, and I was done letting him think he had any say in it. The next morning, I woke up early, the canal outside my window glinting in the dawn light. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and sketched out more plans, not just for the day, but for the months ahead. A weekend trip to the mountains. A new certification course to boost my career. A dinner party with Jess and a few others, just because I could. Work became my proving ground. The promotion had opened doors, and I walked through them without hesitation. I led a pitch for a major client, nailing it so hard my boss pulled me aside after to say, "Lisa, you're killing it. Keep this up, and you're on track for something bigger." I nodded, thanked her, but inside I was buzzing. Not because of the praise, but because I knew I'd earned it. No one could take that away. Outside of work, I kept building. Kickboxing classes turned into a routine, my punches sharper, my stance stronger. Mike, the instructor, started pairing me with tougher opponents, grinning when I held my own. "You've got fire in you," he said one night, tossing me a towel. I just smiled. He had no idea how much. I also kept painting, my watercolors spilling across canvases in chaotic bursts of color. They weren't perfect, but they were honest. Jess came over one evening, saw my latest piece, a swirl of blues and reds, and whistled. "This is you now, isn't it? All bold and unapologetic." "Something like that," I said, laughing. We split a bottle of wine, talked about everything. But Derek, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was living for me, not for someone else's script. Rumors about Derek and Sarah kept trickling in, unasked for. A coworker mentioned seeing them argue at a diner downtown. Another said Margaret was telling anyone who'd listened that Sarah wasn't stepping up as a partner. Apparently, the baby was a handful, and Derek's startup was still hemorrhaging money. Their perfect plan was fraying, and part of me, the smallest part, felt a flicker of pity. Not for him, but for the kid, caught in the middle of their mess. I didn't dwell on it. Their choices, their consequences. I had my own life to build. My brother came to visit one weekend, bringing his chaotic puppy, who chewed my shoelaces and made me laugh harder than I had in months. We walked along the canal, tossing a ball for the dog, talking about nothing and everything. "You seem good," he said, squinting at me in the sunlight. "Really good." "I am," I said, and I meant it. Karen called again a few weeks later. "Derek's lawyer tried one last stunt," she said, her voice dry. "Something about claiming emotional distress." I shut it down. "You're done with him, legally and otherwise." "Thanks, Karen," I said, my voice steady. "I owe you." "You owe yourself," she shot back. "You fought for this." She was right. Every receipt, every bank statement, every moment. I'd stood my ground. It wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about proving I wasn't the woman Derek and Margaret thought they could erase. One night, I found myself at the canal's edge, watching the water ripple under the streetlights. I thought about the house, the one I'd poured 9 years into. It wasn't mine anymore, but it didn't need to be. I'd taken what was mine, my strength, my clarity, my future. Derek had gambled on me folding, but I'd called his bluff and walked away with more than he'd ever expected. I started hosting game nights at my apartment, filling it with laughter and half-burnt casseroles. Jess brought her new girlfriend, who was shy but funny, and my brother showed up with his puppy, who promptly peed on my rug. We laughed until our sides hurt, and I realized this was what home felt like, not a building, but moments, people. The space I'd carved out for myself. One Saturday, I took that trip to the mountains. Just me, a backpack, and a cheap rental car. I hiked until my legs burned, stood at the edge of a cliff, and let the wind whip through my hair. The world stretched out below, vast and open, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt endless. Back in Riverton, I kept writing in my journal, filling pages with thoughts I hadn't let myself think before. Not about Derek or Sarah, but about me, what I wanted, what scared me, what made me feel alive. I wrote about the way the canal sparkled. At night, the sound of my own laughter, the weight of a paintbrush in my hand. I was rediscovering myself, piece by piece, and it felt like coming home. Derek texted one more time, months later. I messed up. Can we meet? I read it, let it sit for a minute, then deleted it. No reply, no explanation. He didn't get to rewrite the ending. I'd already written mine. The final piece fell into place at work. I pitched a project, a risky one, the kind that could either crash or soar. My boss gave me the green light, and when it landed big. My name was on it, my vision, my work. Colleagues started looking at me differently, not just as a team player but as a leader. I didn't need their approval, but it felt good to know I'd earned their respect. One evening, as I locked up my apartment to head to kickboxing, I caught my reflection in the window. I didn't see the woman who'd stood trembling in a hallway, listening to her husband plot her downfall. I saw someone else, someone who'd been broken but rebuilt herself stronger, sharper, unafraid. I'd lost a marriage, a home, a version of myself I thought I needed. But I'd gained something better, the truth. Not just about Derek, but about me. I was enough. I'd always been enough. And now, I was unstoppable. If there was one lesson I'd carry forever, it was this: never let anyone write your story for you. Derek thought he could. He thought he'd win. But I was the one standing. At the end, not just surviving, but thriving. And that? That was my victory.